Hi, everyone. Welcome to Crime Family. I'm your co host, AJ, and I'm here with my two sisters, Lisa and Katie. And for today's episode of the show, we are going to be talking about the Tromp family case, which not the Trump, not the Trump family, the Tromp family. And this is a story that happened back in 2016 in Australia. And it was one that I was actually completely unfamiliar with until just a few weeks ago when I was just looking for cases that I wanted to do, and this one came up, and it is very weird, very strange, and kind of very unique. I never really heard of a case like this before, and you might find that it is a little bit different than what we usually do because it's not really necessarily that a crime has taken place. I mean, there are a few theories out there about what really happened to this family, but I mean, which obviously we'll get into, but just letting you know that it might be a little bit different if you're going to say it's not really a crime, but it's just a very weird creepy case that is still sort of has a lot of unanswered questions, even though there's like a general theory of what did happen that's kind of out there. So just putting that out there. And I'm assuming Lisa and Katie, you said you both had never heard of this case before.
No, doesn't sound familiar.
All right. Without further ado, I'll get into it. So, the Trump family case first came to public attention in a way that was very unsettling and pretty confusing. So, it all starts when a man calls local authorities to report something strange in the back of his pickup truck. He finds a woman lying there, barely responsive, almost comatose. She appeared disoriented, unable to remember her name or explain how she got there. So, of course, he calls the police immediately. When police arrived, they talk with the woman and eventually they identify her as 29-year-old Riana Tromp. Then, just 24 hours later, more than 400 kilometers away from where that happened, another call comes in. Shortly after 10 p.m., a local couple contacts police to report a terrifying encounter on the road. A strange man in a vehicle was aggressively tailgating them, driving so dangerously that they feared for their lives. They said to the police that they couldn't even see the headlights from the car behind them because he was that close to their vehicle. In an article that was talking about this case, it says, quote, when they pulled over, the driver got out of the car and ran towards them before stopping in the middle of the road, staring at them, then walking into nearby Marawa Park, end quote. The couple eventually manages to get away, but the mysterious man flees before the police could arrive or before they could find out really what was happening there. So at first, these two incidences appeared completely unrelated. Like I said, they were 400 kilometers apart. They were a day apart. They seemed like separate random events, but investigators would soon discover that they were part of the same story. So Mark Knight, he's a police sergeant who worked on this case, later described it as, quote, the most bizarre case in 30 years, end quote. As authorities worked to identify Rihanna and understand how this 29-year-old woman ended up in the back of the stranger's vehicle in Goulburn, which is the name of the town in Australia, a disturbing picture began to form. So as it turns out, Rihanna's parents, 51-year-old Mark and 53-year-old Jacoba Tromp, along with her two siblings, Ella, age 22, and Mitchell, age 25, turns out they had all vanished a day earlier from their family home in Sylvan, which is a small town on the outskirts of Melbourne, and no one had heard from them for over a day after they had just vanished from their house. So it's kind of weird that police find out that they vanished from their house or they just left their house, and then one of them shows up in the back of a guy's car, doesn't know where she is, and the other guy is allegedly driving really erratically. They're not together. It's very, very odd.
Do
So
they think they all left at the same time, or was it like separate events where they disappeared like separately, or do they just don't know? They're just not there.
well, I actually the next part I get into that
Oh,
actually. So
okay.
as always, Katie knows where the next she always asks questions right before the part I'm about to. So the circumstances of their disappearances were very unusual and immediately alarming. So the family had left behind their phones, their credit cards, their passports. There were no notes left behind, no messages, no explanation, and no indication of where they were headed. Within hours of the discovery of Rihanna Trump, the case explodes into the national headlines. So it kind of becomes, no, I within the country, just this like media story, this national media story that is very odd. Australians struggled to understand how this entire family could seemingly vanish and then begin to reappear, but only in fragments. Like I said, hundreds of kilometers apart. So, to make sense of what happened, investigators began reconstructing the family's movements from the moment that they left their home. So, turns out they left their home in Sylvan, Australia, which is like I said, a small town on the outskirts of Melbourne, and the date was August 29th of 2016. So, by all outward appearances, the Tromps were not a family in crisis. So, they owned and operated a successful berry farm and also an earth moving business, and were known in their community as hardworking, private, and very close knit. So, all three adult children worked on the farm 7 days a week and appeared deeply committed to the family business. So, neighbors later told police during the investigation that nothing seemed amiss in the days leading up to their disappearance. There were no visible arguments, no signs of distress, no evidence of any financial trouble. All anyone could tell was that they were a very happy family, hardworking. They owned this business, and so it was just very, very odd. And so, what we know of like the family's movements, so they did all leave together. They left their home on August 29th and drove north overnight. They traveled over 800 kilometers in this first night. Then, about 30 kilometers into that drive, the parents, Mark and Jacoba, realized that their son Mitchell had actually brought his phone with him, even though everyone else had left theirs behind. So, convinced that they were being traced, Mitchell throws the phone out the window, or they make Mitchell throw the phone out the window, or he voluntarily does it. We don't really know, but he discards of his phone, um, like 30 kilometers into this drive. And so, like I said, they drive overnight, over 800 kilometers, and they drive to the town of Bathurst. And so this is where the first major separation occurs on the morning of Tuesday, August 30th. And this is just one day after the family leaves. So Mitchell leaves the group, and he's later seen alone at the train station in Bathurst. So then they're just down to four: Mark, Jacoba, and then sisters Riana and Ella. They continue on, and they eventually reach the Jenolan Caves area, which is like a popular tourist destination. And nobody really knows why they went to these caves or what they were doing there. But it was during their time at the caves that the family kind of separates again. At this point, the sisters, Rihanna and Ella, leave their parents behind. They steal a car. They drive about 2 hours toward Goulburn, which is the town where Rihanna is eventually found. But what was said between them or what prompted this decision to leave their parents, like that's never been publicly explained. Nobody really knows. But for some reason, when they got as far as there with their parents, and then they chose to just leave for whatever reason. So when the sisters arrived in Goulburn, they actually report their parents missing. And then shortly after, the two sisters separate. So this missing persons report is actually what leads the police to like make all of this connection between what's happening, because the police then go to the family home when they get this missing person report. And so after they report their parents missing, they separate. Rihanna's path would lead to the moment that first brought the case to light, where she's in the back of this truck. So a local man named Keith Whitaker tells police that he had been driving for about an hour when he felt a sudden kick from the back of his utility vehicle. He said, quote, "I turned around and saw two legs stretched across the back between my seat and the floor. She was lying on the floor. I got an extreme shock," end quote. So he pulls over and says that Rihanna was lying in the back, disoriented, catatonic, and unable to identify herself. So he immediately calls authorities, and then Rihanna is taken to the hospital for urgent assessment. So we don't really know what happened between the time when she separates from her sister and where she ends up in this truck, because obviously she wasn't catatonic or like unresponsive. They both go report their parents missing earlier that day. But then for whatever reason after that, her condition deteriorates, and now she's like almost catatonic just later that night, which is really, really weird. So Ella, meanwhile, because they separated, she makes her way back to the family home the following night, Tuesday, August 30th. So by this time, it's only like 24 hours from the time they left the house. She tells Rihanna before they parted ways that she wanted to return home to feed her horses. So when Ella arrives back in Sylvan, police were already at the family house, obviously due to the missing persons report that she and her sister had filed earlier that day. And when the police arrive at the scene, it's reported that the front door was unlocked, the house was in disarray, and the vehicles that remained on the property all had the keys left in the ignition. So, according to the Daily Telegraph, years worth of financial documents had been rifled through. Passports and credit cards belonging to every family member were found in ordered piles. One officer remarked that, quote, "they were clearly looking for something." So Officer Mark Knight said, quote, "On Tuesday afternoon, when I was called to the actual address, it was an unusual scene that I was faced with. Keys were in cars, passports were there, and phones were on the bench. It was an unusual crime scene, one that I hadn't seen before." End quote. At this point, people don't really know what's going on at all. All the police know is that these two parents were reported missing. But it's kind of weird because they were reported missing, but the two sisters had seen their parents just a couple of hours before that at the Genola Caves. Like, so they knew where their parents were, but I don't know. They just said they reported them missing. So all police really know is that there's these two parents that are missing. The house was left in disarray. It was very odd. And one daughter is catatonic, and the other one shows up at the house while the police are there. So it's all very, very weird. So I guess before I go on and then a little bit any further, do you guys have any thoughts or questions or like what are your initial
So the
feelings?
whole sorry, wait, there's mother, father, and
Three kids.
two kids. So they
Yeah.
all but they're all heading out to a train station together. Like
No,
where were they?
so they all drove, like they drove overnight the first night, like 800 kilometers. And then the son, Mitchell, leaves. Like he separates from them, he leaves. And he just leaves. He goes to the train station, and then he's spotted there by witnesses, like at the local train station by himself. Um, and then the four that are left, after Mitchell leaves, they continue on and they go to the caves together. But then while they're at the caves, the two daughters, separate from the parents, steal a car, and drive to a town 2 hours away and report their parents missing. So by this point, they're all kind of separated. Like the two girls are there, the son went somewhere on the train, and then the two parents are at the caves. So very,
Sorry,
very
and
weird.
leave the parents and then report them missing, and then um what? Then the two kids go to the house and the police are already there. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like Ella, one of the daughters, she goes back to the house, and when she gets there, the police are already there because the parents have been reported missing by her and her sister. So then they go to the family's house. That's like the first place they go, and then they find the house like in disarray, and all of the like the financial records are all like in neat piles, like years of financial records and all of their stuff, like their passports, their credit cards, and everything, and their phones were left behind. The cars had the keys in the ignition still, all of the cars, and the house was unlocked. Um, so it wasn't like there was like wasn't like a sign of a struggle. Like it wasn't like there had been like a big struggle in the house, but they said it was kind of in disarray. Like there were like documents piled up everywhere, and like it was looked like it had been like a frantic search for something, and like the police officer said it was clear that they were looking for something specific.
Well, did the kids think it was weird that the financials were in piles, or were they there when that happened, like, with their parents
Yeah, well, I think they were there when their parent like that had all happened before they
before they
left
left?
the house. So it's kind of like for whatever reason, the parents had been, or the kids too, had been like looking through years of their financial records because they own this farm, looking for whatever. I don't know what they were looking for. Um,
Well, were
and
they
then
in
they,
financial trouble? Like, did that ever come out where they're, like, in debt or owed people large amounts of money?
well, I kind of go into that a little bit later. But no one really knew. There was never any like the police obviously investigated that, but there was no ever any evidence that there were in financial hardships or debt of any
Mm.
kind. Um, so, and no one ever could say what they were actually looking for in those documents or like what was so frantic. But for whatever reason, before they left, they were looking through years of documents to find
I find it weird that they
something.
have all those, like, financial documents set out, but they don't but if their passports and things are missing, you'd think, like, okay, they're fleeing and they're trying to leave, but all that stuff is still there. So it's not like they were, you know, in debt. We're just gonna, like, flee this life because all their stuff was there. I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, and it's like obviously they didn't plan to. I don't know what their plan was. Couldn't really get very far. They didn't have their passports with them. Um, didn't have their credit cards, so everything was just cash. Um, they took one like, they had several vehicles, but they just took one. They all were in the same car and just pieced out. And they all left their phones behind either, so, like, they were going, like, real old school, like, tech-free road trip, and I don't know if they even knew where they were heading specifically or they're just going, but that's why they had their Mitchell, like, throw his phone away.
Weird. Maybe
once
they
they
were
realized
trying
that
to
he had
get
it.
new identity. That's why they left their old one behind.
Yeah, maybe that's possible. Lisa, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they would definitely fleeing. They were doing something shady.
Yeah.
I
Um,
find it weird that the whole family would do that though. Like you'd think like at least a couple of them. Maybe that's why they took off separately like eventually because the whole family's like, yeah, let's leave our life. I think like just the parents would be like, yeah, we're getting out of here, but all of them were like, yeah, let's go. It's kind of weird.
the creepiest part of this whole thing, like when I first like learned about this case was like the local man who was driving his truck and just found this like comatose woman in the back of his car or like his back of his truck is so creepy to me. And that's really what like obviously started this whole because that obviously hit the headlines and that's when like the public became aware of it. But the police were already kind of knew a little bit about it because they were already at the house by that point looking for the parents. Um,
So the person they found in the car, was she like drugged? Did she have any drugs in her system? Or she just like didn't remember what happened, or does she have an explanation eventually? Or are you gonna get to
well,
that?
I will get to like she was taken to the hospital for urgent assessment because clearly something was not right. I do get into that a little bit. Again, there's a lot. It's very weird in the fact that like there's a lot of questions that remain and like a lot of the stuff we're never gonna know. And there's no real explanation as to what was really going on, even though there's like some theories and like they've kind of come to a conclusion of what might have been happening, but it's never been confirmed. So it's just really weird. It's
So
kind of like
so
something you'd see in a movie, but
her and her sisters, they stole the car and went back home, and then summer after that, she was found in this truck.
yeah, well, they didn't go home. They just drove to a town like 2 hours away
Oh,
because where they
and
they left their parents, but that was still like hours and hours from home, so they weren't close to
also
home at all.
they report the parents missing, but they never go back to talk to the police actually, go to the house or anything.
Well, so they report their parents. So okay, yeah, they're at the caves with their parents.
Yeah.
So the son has already left, and then there's the four of them
Mhm.
at the caves. The two daughters, they decide again. We don't really know what the discussion was or like why they just left their parents, but they they stole a car and they drove away to this town, and then they reported their parents missing. And then after they reported their parents missing, they separate. So Ella, she goes back home. So she's the one who goes back home and finds the police already at their house. And Rihanna's the one that ends up in the back of a truck. But she's like comatose or like catatonic, like not responsive. So I don't know what happened between the time when she was with her sister and when she ends up in the back of the truck. Like it's at that point, I think it's like within the same day. Um, so for whatever reason, I think the reports say that she was like trying to she was gonna like plan to steal the truck. That's why she was in the truck. I guess she was gonna steal it and try to drive home. I don't really know, but that was the plan. And then Keith, this local, he says he drove for like an hour. So she was like in the truck for like an hour, but then he like feels a kick in the back of his chair and sees this woman in the back. All of that happened. So within 24 hours, they leave on the 29th. The 30th is when the police are at the house searching and Ella finds her way home. So then the next day, Wednesday, August 31st, the son, Mitchell, he also returns back home. He apparently had traveled by train from Bathurst. So he took several trains back home. And so it took him like almost a day to get there. And so by this point, like this is just 2 days after they left, all three children are accounted for. So Ella and Mitchell are at home, and then Rihanna is recovering in a hospital somewhere. But Mark and Jacoba Tromp are still missing. So the two parents are like AWOL. Nobody knows where they are. And what investigators were able to piece together next only deepened the mystery. So after being left behind near the Janolan Caves, what we know, Mark and Jacoba drove to the town of Wangaratta. There, for reasons that are still unknown, they separate as well. So Jacoba ends up traveling north. She goes back kind of the same direction that they had come from. And while Mark remains in the town of Wangaratta. And police now believe that it was around this time, around 10 p.m., that Mark was involved in that dangerous tailgating incident that was reported by the frightened couple that I mentioned before. So the vehicle that was described in that encounter was a gray Pew Peugeot. I don't know how to pronounce that. Station wagon, because it's the name of the brand, but a gray station wagon. Um, and it matched his daughter Ella's car, which was the one that the family took when they fled the house. So all the pieces there suggest that it was him who was tailgating this couple. We don't know why he was like driving erratically or why he was tailgating them or anything. But yeah, that's where he is as of 10 p.m. on that night. And then a day later, the mom, Jacoba, she's found more than 350 kilometers away in the town of Yas. She was wandering alone and appeared highly agitated. So obviously they report her like on the side of the road, agitated, clearly not well. And so the BBC reports that she was then taken to a local hospital, and then eventually she was transferred to Goulburn to be reunited with her daughter Riana in the hospital there where Riana was.
Did they
So
do
at the,
drug testing on all the members of the family? I feel like they're just like they're all on this bad trip, and they're just like all end up in different places because of how they're reacting to this acid
yeah,
trip. It
so
feels like.
well, so one of the big theories, because this is all like this whole case takes place within like 1 week. So this like during this 1 week is kind of like a manhunt for like the parents and like then eventually just the dad because then the mom is found. So it's like kind of like national news. Like it's a week long whole thing of like where's the parents, what happened to this family, and that was one of the big theories that kind of emerged because like I read a lot of articles that were put out like at the time this was happening, and there are a lot of like theories that like could be like drug induced, some type of like drug induced psychosis or something. Or one of the other theories is that like they were like that the family was involved in like the drug trade. And so they were fleeing from like people that they owed money to or whatever. That was another theory that had come up. But yeah, so I'm assuming if they're it never explicitly says that they did drug testing, but they were in this hospital for several days. So I'm assuming they would have done a drug test. It's probably one of the first things
It's
that they would have done.
interesting. It's interesting that like the daughter would then like even call the police and put the parents missing. If they're doing something shady, why even call the police? Just disappear without anyone knowing. So I'm wondering why. It just makes me wonder if the daughter like why she would call and her parents missing if they were being shady.
Yeah. Like if it was that was one of the things too that I think was like debunking it was like if they really were fleeing out of fear, like part of like the drug trade or whatever, like they wouldn't have reported their parents, but they're not going to want to know anyone to know where their parents are specifically. But I also don't understand. I don't really understand why why the two daughters like left their parents. Um, like I said, it's never explained like what the conversation was, why they chose to leave. They just kind of left them, abandoned them at the caves, and then reported them missing. But it's not like a typical missing person's. Like you're not like, oh, I don't know where this person is. It's like, no, I know where they are. 2 hours ago they were there. I was just with them 2 hours ago and I left them. So it's not like the same as like a normal missing persons report. It's like I don't know. And I don't know how like the police would deem that they were actually missing because usually don't you have to wait like 24 hours? But if they could say, oh yeah, 2 hours ago I was with them at the caves. Like how do you know they're missing? They could still be at the cave. I don't know. It's very weird. But it just says that they reported them missing.
To me, almost I don't know. This is extreme, but it feels like this like whole family like suicide pact thing. They're going to like these sketchy caves to like do something, and then everybody is like, "No, I'm not doing this anymore." But the parents are still like in it, and so the kids freak out and leave, and then call the police. But why wouldn't they say that to the police? Like, my parents are going to harm themselves, but they just say they're missing. Like it's weird. Like the wording, I feel. What like
Yeah, it's like
I don't know.
yeah, we left them at the caves and drove 2 hours away, and they're missing. Like maybe go back.
Yeah.
They're not missing from the town you're in because it's 2 hours away from where you left them. Like
Yeah, like,
maybe.
I don't know where they are because we bailed
Yeah,
on them, like, that doesn't
yeah,
make
yeah,
sense.
yeah. I don't get that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
weird.
that's why it's weird because like I said, there's a lot of articles that came out at the time. Like a lot of the articles I read were dated like September 3rd, 2016, like in the middle of all of this when it's happening. So a lot of those, it's like there's a lot of gaps in the information because they're kind of like these articles are coming out in real time, right? So they aren't aware of all of the stuff that's happening. But there's not really a ton of stuff after it's all sort of resolved. But then a lot of the pieces like aren't then filled in later. And then also I'll go into later, but like I don't actually I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to say. But like, there's still a lot of questions left, and there's still a lot of gaps that we don't really know. So it's kind of weird. Like, yeah, I don't know. They reported. It says that they reported their parents missing, but they're not really missing. You were with them 2 hours ago in a town. Like, you know where they are. You know, and I don't really know what information was given to the police at the time. Like when what they said along with it, like our parents are acting weird, or we were also acting weird with them, and then we just chose to leave. So it's all very
Yeah, it's like
mysterious.
if I was the police, I'd be like, if they reported you missing and we left our parents in this town, like, well, they're not missing then. I'm not going to your house to start a missing person report. Go get them. Like, what? The fact the cops made away with like went to the house to look at like I don't know, like, if someone maybe they didn't say that they left the parents there, maybe
I
not.
mean maybe I'm assuming I'm sure if they said that their parents were there, they also sent police to the caves to find them, like, that's where they would go. But they also went to the house, like and also the house it would have had to be a different, um, police units, right? Because these are hours apart, like, their house at this point is, like, 800 kilometers away from where this is, so it's not like it would be this necessarily the same exact team of police officers, right? So one, I'm sure, goes to the house. They, like, inform them, like, "Go to this house where this family lives because it's, like, sketchy." And then another would have go to the caves where the sisters say they are. But then, obviously, they're not at the caves, they don't find them. They're not at the house, obviously. And then while the police are at the house, the daughter that just reported her parents missing shows up when they're at the house later. And it's just it's very weird. So I don't know. But yeah, like the timeline is also weird. But something happens to Rihanna between the time that she reports her parents missing and then when she ends up catatonic, like hours later or like whatever. So I don't know. It's very weird. And then the father, Mark, is like tailgating this couple, driving really erratically, like being very weird. And then I said earlier, like the couple said that he like got out of the car and ran towards their car and like staring at them, and then just runs into the park that's nearby. And then by the time the police come or by the time they call the police, like he's gone. They can't find him. Um, and that was happening like I said, I think it was 10 p.m. on the night of again, that would probably be a different police officer. So they're not putting all these pieces together in real time. Like they get a report that there's this weird man like ran towards their car and was tailgating them, but they're not putting together that that might be this guy. And but then later they find like the car that he was driving matches the daughter's car. That was the one they used when they left. So then eventually they do put all these pieces together. But when it's happening in the moment, they're just like they're treating that as probably as just a separate incident. Like there's this creepy guy tailgating this couple is weird. And then there's this woman who's comatose in the back of a truck later. They're not putting the pieces together that it's all the same family at this time. And eventually it is. And then when it obviously becomes national headlines, then they're putting it together. But yeah, that's why a lot of the details are there's like still gaps in some of the things, which is really weird. But yeah, so like I said, they do find Jacoba, which is the mom. They find her 350 kilometers away in the town of Yas. She was wandering alone and appeared highly agitated. And then like I said before, the BBC reports that she was taken to a local hospital that was like nearby, and then eventually she's transferred to Goulburn to be reunited with Rihanna at the hospital there. So eventually they're both like in this hospital for like intense assessment because something is happening. But then, so this means that this leaves only Mark unaccounted for. So the father is still AWOL at this point. And so for 6 days, Mark Tromp remains missing. So Mitchell and Ella, so two of the children, they make public pleas for their father's safe return home. So they say, quote, "I just really want my dad to be found. He's not dangerous. He's my mate. He's my father. And I love him. I just want someone to find him and bring him home." End
It's like
quote.
I was like, I really want to find my dad, but I left him high and dry at a cave, and I
Yeah.
don't know where he
Well,
went.
yeah. Well, the son left before they went to the cave. So he was the first to bail. For whatever reason, he's just like, "I'm out of here." He goes home. He takes the train home. Whereas the two sisters were like, "We're gonna steal a car and go." He took the train. But again, we don't know the conversation that happened there. Like, did he like escape and they didn't know he was going and they just couldn't find him? Or did he tell them like, "I'm out of here. Bye." I'm assuming he didn't because they probably wouldn't just want to let him leave. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, maybe the kids were like worried the parents were gonna kill them because they would trying to get them out of like maybe that's why they were escaping.
Yeah, I mean, and I find weird that like in these articles that I'm reading that are coming out in real time, it seems also because I was like, wouldn't the kids have told them everything they know? Like, this is what happened. Like, this is what my parents said they were doing before. But like, based on the articles, it's like it doesn't seem like there's much information that is known, or at least like, I guess it's not information they're putting out there at the time. Maybe they do know it, they're just not releasing that. Because like the kids would have a lot of answers too, right? Of like what the conversation was that happened at the caves before before the kids left and stole a car, and they're like, "I'm out of here." Um, but yeah, we don't really know. But anyway, so the father is still missing. Two of the kids go. on live TV, and they're like pleading for their father's return because they don't know where he is. There are also reports of like motel break-ins that surface in the Wangaratta area during that time, and that's the area he was last seen, the dad. Though it's never confirmed that these break-ins were ever connected to this case, but that's something that the police are considering at this time because they just don't know. But then finally, a break comes in the case when Mark was found wandering along a roadside near Wangaratta Airport, not far from where he was last seen. The police questioned him, they conducted a mental health assessment, and they ultimately released him into the care of his brother, who was a police officer. As he's being escorted away, like this case was pretty high profile in Australia at the time. Like tons of media had arrived by this point, and as he's being escorted away, he was seen giving the middle finger to the media. A week later, he gives a public statement where he says, quote, "Without reservation, I apologize for the hurt and concern caused by these events," end quote. So when the family was reunited, they were physically unharmed, but their explanations raised more questions than answers. So their recollections of the journey were fragmented and vague. They struggled to articulate what they believed they were fleeing from or why they had left so suddenly. And police explored every possible angle. So things like from criminal involvement, financial stress, substance abuse, external threats, but they really found nothing. There was no evidence of coercion, no crime, no clear motive for what was happening. And the BBC later reported that Sergeant Mark Knight, who knew the family personally, but he was also investigating this case, said there were no diagnosed mental health conditions, no drug use, no debts, and no involvement in religious groups. He says, quote, "This is just a massive meltdown. I'm sure of it," end quote. And then after returning home, so this whole ordeal is over. The family's all reunited. They basically withdraw from public view. They just like don't give in. They refuse to give any interviews. They don't talk to anyone. They don't really explain anything. They offered no further explanations. They chose to return to their family farm and their private lives. And with no criminal activity uncovered, police eventually just closed the case. But still, the story lingers, and it's just really unsettling in its strangeness and its lack of resolution. So, like, while it's closed, the police don't really have an explanation as to what really happened. So, there are many theories, like I said, that ran rampant about what caused the erratic behavior. One theory that kind of came up and was kind of being heavily discussed was that it was some type of chemical that was used on their farm caused some type of delirium. Like it was their exposure to this particular chemical that like kind of put them into this like psychosis. Others believed that they were fleeing from debt collectors. So while they said the police never really uncovered any type of information about that, but there are people who were still saying like maybe it was debt collectors, or maybe there's still people out there, of course, who like refuse to believe um, that they weren't involved in something criminal and that it was like they were fleeing that for that very particular reason. So only toward the end of the investigation did authorities and medical professionals cautiously suggest what might have happened. So this is a conclusion that they ultimately came to. And it actually, they believe, was a case of a rare shared psychological crisis in which fear and paranoia spreads within a close-knit group of people, reinforcing itself without outside intervention. The term that's often used is called folie à deux. It's like a French term that means madness of two. So it's a phenomenon that was first described in the 19th century, and that was when it's when two people appeared to share and amplify the same delusions. So it's like instead of one person just having this, it's like when you're in close proximity and you're like tight knit, it's like one person's delusions can like spread almost like a virus to everyone that's around them. It's a very, very weird condition. And it was later uncovered that Mark Tromp had been displaying signs of like increasing anxiety and paranoia in the months leading up to when they all just got up and left. And on the day of their escape, Mark told his family that he believed they were in grave danger and had to leave immediately. And so during this ordeal, sort of when they are speaking publicly, like when their father, I think it's when their father's still missing at this time, Mitchell and Ella briefly speak publicly, and they admit how difficult the situation was to explain. Mitchell says, quote, "I've never seen anything like it. It's really hard to explain or put a word on it, but they were just fearing for their lives, and then they decided to flee. It was a buildup of different, normal, everyday events, just pressure, and it slowly got worse as the days went by," end quote. And it seemed like Mitchell and Ella, they may have sort of believed what their parents were saying, or they were concerned about what their parents were saying, but they were not really as adamant about the supposed danger that they were in. And overall, the two of them seemed the most quote unquote like okay. Mitchell says, quote, "I just had to go with the family because I wanted to see where they were going. I couldn't leave them." But as end quote. But then he later says, quote, "But yeah, it was tough to see your family like that, and I've never seen anything like it. But the main thing is they're okay now. Everyone's safe. Everyone is well. So we can just go back to being a family again." End quote. So of the three siblings, it's obvious that Rihanna, she was the one that was most impacted. So this eventually led to her breakdown and eventual comatose state that she was in. So she was quoted in 2017, like she gave one interview in 2017, which would have been a year after this, saying, quote, "You do start thinking the same. You have a few things and they do build up. You can get sick in some way." End quote. So it seems like it was really the two parents that had just had this like overwhelming sense of paranoia and this fear. And then it kind of spread, I guess, to Rihanna. So the three of them were kind of in it. And then the other two maybe were less in it, but like Mitchell said, he just went with the family because obviously he didn't want to just like he didn't know where they were going to go or where they're going to end up. He's like, might as well just go with them. That's probably why he brought his phone with him while everyone else left theirs behind. So yeah, like this conclusion by the police or by like experts was never really presented as like a definitive answer, but it was just sort of what everyone sort of settled on as like the most possible explanation. And so even with that explanation, this whole case remains deeply unsettling. Like there's no villain, there's no conspiracy, no clean conclusion. Instead, it just kind of leaves behind this like portrait of this ordinary family that's like they come overcome by this like fear, this intense fear and anxiety. And it's kind of scary actually. Like it kind of shows you that like obviously it was something their mental health was not well. But it's weird because they said there was no like external triggers that they could come to like wasn't because they were using drugs or because they were like I had a lot. I mean, I'm sure running a family farm is really stressful, but like it wasn't like they were at risk of losing their farm or like anything like that. It was just they became convinced, the parents, that there was someone after them. And so that's kind of where the case ends. Like at this point, it was 10 years ago, but they all kind of ended up remaining like pretty out of public view and no one knows really what happened. Only that like they can explain as that's likely what happened, like this shared psychosis, but obviously they can't prove that really because it's a really rare condition. So I don't really know how you do prove that. But yeah, so that's really the case. So it's very, very weird. I don't know. It was just sort of like a week long, like sort of mental breakdown that this whole family had. I don't know. What do you think?
Now that you explained it, I guess it kind of makes sense because I was like
Oh,
thinking like maybe one person was paranoid, but why did they all go along with it? And yeah, I guess if they were all sharing this psychosis or just like really thinking that whoever started it, their father, I guess, was right and just believed him completely. But then it doesn't explain some of the other things that happened though. Like why I guess they were all going along with it, but then they didn't tell the police that, and then they like leave at different times, and then one of them's comatose in the back of some dude's truck. Like that doesn't really explain that.
And like
So
I was thinking, like the only thing I could think of was like maybe because like the sort of I don't know the stigma of mental health, like maybe they didn't want to say their parents they're psychotic, like they're under some type of thing, and like maybe they just didn't. I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of. Like maybe they didn't want people just assuming one thing because they say, oh, there's like something mentally wrong. They just wanted the police to treat it as like a missing person case. I
yeah,
don't know.
that's true.
That's the only thing I could think of. Because otherwise, why wouldn't you tell them as much information as you can?
Hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why would leave so many questions and not fill in those gaps? I don't know. So
you
super
know,
weird.
I saw a physics file episode where like the house was full of black mold, but they didn't know, and it made them the husband and the daughter like kind of lose their mind a bit, and they didn't understand why, and it turned out the house was full of mold. That was my first thought.
Oh, maybe.
But if they went back to the house and are they? I mean, nothing's happened since.
I was gonna say, yeah, did they change the chemicals? Like if it was those chemicals, like they're still doing the same thing. I don't know. And if they were running from like debt collectors or the mob or whatever, like going back, that's not going to fix that, right? Like this week long whatever isn't going to keep the mob away. So it's weird.
Yeah, because like yeah, they returned back to the same house. They kept running. Now they're back to like running their farm. I'm assuming, but like I said, they kind of all went very like low key, like low profile after this. Like never really spoke publicly. Like if you try to search them up, I don't even know if you can even find them now. So it's like Yeah, clearly it wasn't that they were trying to escape from somebody because you'd think they wouldn't return back to that same place.
It seems like almost seems like, the kids were influenced by the parents, but as soon as they all kinda broke off, they're thinking like, what are we doing? We like, once they're away from the parents, they realize how crazy this is, so that's when they report the parents, I think, and but then why was Rianne in the back of a truck, I don't know. Weird.
Yeah, I don't really know how she kind of deteriorated so quickly. Like, she seemed fine, like, when she was with her sister reporting her parents missing, and then within hours, she's comatose in the back of a truck. Like, I don't know how that happens. Um, and she hasn't spoken publicly really, I don't think, about that specifically. So I don't know. But and also, yeah, like, I just find it weird, like, Mitchell, like, the first to bail, why wouldn't he like, he left them and just took the train back home. But, like, what was his plan? Like, he didn't report them missing. He didn't do anything. Like, what was his plan? Just gonna return to the house, and then what? Like, it's just when he returned there, like, the news was already out, the police were already there, so, like, he didn't have to do anything, but, like, I don't know what he's was planning to do when he got back home, like, I don't know. It's very weird, very weird. But maybe the house did have black mold, I don't know. Maybe they went home and got rid of the black mold in the house, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird.
But it's just kinda crazy though that, like, something like that can, like, spread among people. Like, if that is really what happened, like, if it's that is that rare condition that I talked about, that, like,
Yeah.
I guess they can kind of all feed off each other, like, if they're isolated enough, like, maybe
But, like, did they not were they homeschooled or something? Were they not out in society?
well, no, like, they were all in their 20s, so they weren't in school, but they worked 7 days a week on the family farm, like, they were all super into the work, like, they're probably just
Mm.
Yeah, it's like a
homebodies, like,
super
the
close, yeah, like, family. That
yeah,
was their life, was, like, the farm and the family, basically. 'Cause that
yeah.
yeah, you'd think, like, one person's starting to get paranoid and, like, crazy. You think one of them would be like, "What the hell?" Like, snap out of it. But instead, they all just went along with it.
Yeah. It's
Weird.
very, very weird, so, yeah, like, when you watch, there's, like, lots of there's different I wouldn't really call them documentaries, but there's, like, different videos on YouTube about this case, and, like, all of them are, like, quite short, like, they're 20, 30 minutes just because there's not much on this case, like, this is what happened, this is what it is, but there's just no explanation of, like, what happened, so it's not like one of those ones I mean, I'm sure there is Reddit rabbit holes you can go down of all the theories, but I don't know. It's just
Do you
very
think, like,
weird.
Vianne and whatever was faking being, like, comatose and stuff? That was just she want like, that was tight kinda on purpose so they would think that something like, she wouldn't be looked at as, like, a she was a victim in that case or something? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know, but, like, I mean, she was, like, in the hospital for, like, evaluation for several days, so I don't know if they would do that if you didn't actually show signs that you were actually something was happening? I don't know. Like, I feel like they could determine if she was faking it pretty quickly, but I don't know. It's just very weird, but, like, also the mother was, like when they found her, she was highly agitated, like, just wandering around by herself, like, agitated, so but it's also weird because if they were really, like, afraid that someone was out to get them, like, why would they separate? Like, the parents even separated, like, even if it was the 2 of them, but they chose to separate, but maybe that was their thing, like, when people say, "Okay, we're to split up," like, at least if they find us, they won't find us together. I don't know. It's very weird, but I'd be very interested to,
And
like,
and then
hear
they
them.
just someone's looking for them, and then they go back home where they definitely can be found.
Yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, maybe they kind of came to realize that no one was after them. That's why they felt safe going back to the house, but I don't know. Very odd. So, like I said,
Yeah.
it is a little bit of a
Weird.
different case because it's not like there's no crime necessarily, although I think there was an article that said, like, one of the sisters was being charged with, like, stealing a vehicle because they stole a car.
Oh, yeah.
But, so that's, like, the only crime really, or breaking into the other Rihanna breaking into the other guy's truck. But, yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so that's why it's unique, like, no, like, crime really, no explanation, just a very weird mystery of this family, so that's the Tromp family, I guess. And it's been 10 years now since it happened, so hope they're doing well now. Um, but
It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's kinda sad. I think it is sad, and I'm sure, like, I feel like if there really it was some type of mental health breakdown, like, I'm
It would
sure
be
there
more. more reports of something crazy going on, wouldn't there?
Yeah,
Like
well, I was just gonna
they're back to normal. Like
well, I'm sure
no,
maybe they were
make
getting treatment,
like maybe yes.
but I feel bad for them because now it's like I'm sure they're, like, probably horrified that this is public. Like, they had this breakdown very publicly, and everyone in the country in Australia was, like, watching what was happening, and so it's like, most people who are going through that hopefully don't have to go through it on, like, a national in the public, so I'm sure they felt horrified after. So, yeah, I would be very interested to, like, see them give an interview now just to see how they're doing, but obviously they wanna remain private, but very weird. If you or someone you know is struggling with their mental health, just know that help is available. You can go to findahelpline.com to search for relevant services available in your country. Or if you are in Canada or the US, you can dial 988 for the Suicide Crisis Helpline to get immediate assistance 24/7. So, with that, that is our coverage of the Tromp family case. I guess you call it a case. Incident, I guess we'll say. So yeah, that's it for this week. If you are a fan of the show, you can follow us on all the social medias, Crime Family Podcast, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We're also on YouTube, so you can just type in Crime Family Podcast on YouTube. You'll find us. You can find the video versions of the show on YouTube and also on Spotify. So if you are a Spotify listener, you can watch the video there or just subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can do that there. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it is just the audio there for now. And if you want to give us, feedback on the show or case suggestions or just give us your thoughts on the podcast or like theories about the cases that we do, you can email us crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. And that way you can keep in touch with us. And yeah. So that's it for this week. We will see you next week with a brand new case. Until then, take care. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.